Well, good morning to those of you here on the West, and good afternoon to those of you on the East. Thank you for joining me today while we take a look at why it's time to go cashless. My name is Joni Eros, and I am the Sales Director for the Pacific Northwest here at Pay by Phone, which is headquartered in beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia. Prior to working with mobile payment technology, I did work for a parking hardware provider. So this evolution of parking payments, as well as the evolving consumer behavior around it, has always been a very major part of my parking journey. But when I am not busy solving the world's parking problems, I am also a wife and a mother. Truth be told, my main hobby is musical theater, but I'm also a year-round hockey mom and a year-round softball mom, so it really doesn't leave me a lot of time for Fiddler on the Roof. So today I'd like to focus our discussion around three main objectives. The first is understanding how the lack of consumer choice plays into the success, or subsequently the failure, of any cashless environment. Next, we'll take a look at multi-vendor approaches, what we can learn from the success this has had in Europe, and where we currently stand with it today in North America. And finally, we'll dive into behavioral changes. How has the pandemic escalated this urgency to move towards a truly cashless operation? But before we dive into the current mobile payment and cashless trends in parking, let's take a look at how other industries have handled consumer choice. So in these maps across the US, you can see cell phone coverage by service provider. So in most cases, there is redundant coverage across the whole country. So what does that mean? Does that mean that each American has more than one cell phone? No, probably not. That means that Americans get the same level of expected service no matter where they are. Consumers make choice based on a variety of different things. It might be cost, it might be convenience. For me, it was because it was the only cell phone provider in our mall. It might be the level of customer service. Maybe it just comes down to the length of service. Well, we can see here that Verizon has the majority of the coverage, and because of that, most likely is the highest cost. There is still wide coverage for all other leading providers. So a similar concept to think about is with credit card brands. A method of payment is a very personal choice. A credit card choice is likely made by a consumer for very similar reasons as in the cell phone example. But maybe they get rebates, maybe they get travel rewards. Whatever it is, it needs to drive the same outcome, which is the delivery of goods and services. So again, you can see the major preference here seems to be Visa, but it doesn't mean that we just simply don't accept the other cards. Consumer expectation is being able to pay with the credit card of their choice, just like I expect I can use my cell phone wherever I may go. But imagine if you didn't have that choice. Imagine if it was expected that I had to subscribe to all of the credit cards and all of the cell phone providers to facilitate my needs wherever I go. This would be a serious inconvenience to the consumer, and subsequently, it would seriously hinder the use of these services. And that's ultimately not a good outcome for the service provider. So back to mobile payments and the choice we provide, or lack thereof. I've broken out what I think are the three main challenges around promoting a cashless environment for the parking operations, and I'm going to dive into each one of these in a little bit more detail. So the first one is technology. So collaboration and partnerships. One of the benefits of having a cashless, and especially a mobile cashless environment, is the lack of needed physical infrastructure and hardware. This is an ability to really go asset light. One of the challenges of making this type of program successful, however, is ensuring that all the other components of technology are in place to support it. So what that means is to accept mobile payments, or one step further, to accept multiple mobile payment providers, enforcement systems need to be working in real time. They need to have the ability to accept real-time transaction information. So this is going to require that all vendors in the technology space are willing to work together. They have to have their systems built on an open type of architecture or an open API to allow this flow of real-time data. The collaboration of this data from all these multiple points is very integral to having a smooth operation. It's imperative that both partners and competitors are willing to come to the table and play in the same space. Unfortunately, we in the parking world, we're still often dealing in very siloed environments. Maybe we have some manual processes in place still. Maybe we're finding ourselves pigeonholed into working with only one vendor, and they might not be providing the best offering across all of these facets. Maybe that provider has no interest or sees no value in coming to the table for collaboration. So I've listed out just a few components here to consider. One is your enforcement. LPR, maybe you're considering a license plate recognition, wayfinding, maybe mapping. They might not all come from the same technology partner, but they're all very necessary collaborations when you're trying to develop a successful mobile payment program. And that is the most frictionless way to becoming truly cashless. Unfortunately, for mobile payments, choice is not the expectation quite yet. So the next challenge I'd like to highlight is limited coverage. Limited app coverage is a real blocker to full adoption of a mobile cashless environment. So unlike the cell phone network or credit card providers, mobile payments sometimes aren't an option at all, or maybe they're just a single app offering. Now I've taken a little bit of artistic liberty here in the coloring of my map of Canada, but essentially what it points out that there are 3 major mobile payment providers in this entire country, and there's very, very little crossover. We find this especially true when we're taking a look at higher learning institutions and municipal environments. So what one consumer can use in Vancouver, they can't use in Montreal. And when they're in Mississauga, they have to choose another one all over again. It's like when I travel somewhere for work and I haven't been there before, I'm comfortable getting an Uber because that's what I know. But if it's a high volume time and I have a meeting to get to, it's also very comforting to know that I have the option to switch over to Lyft and see if they're going to be any faster. So in Canada, the offering is typically one or none, which lends itself to very limited coverage and again, no choice. So what does this mean for adoption? Our third challenge, adoption and education. This one is quite simple, and the challenge is just that it's simply overlooked. Brand recognition comes from repeated offerings, regardless of where the item is being offered. Human beings, or consumers, are creatures of habit, and therefore they typically become very brand loyal. Being able to use something that we're familiar with and comfortable with ultimately lends itself to a more positive experience. Yes, a more positive parking experience. Convenience equals compliance, very simple. All that means is that we're more likely to be compliant with parking requirements if they're easy for us and they're obvious to us. It's choosing the path of least resistance. Convenience equals compliance. And finally, compliance ultimately benefits the parking operator by way of higher revenue, parker satisfaction, repeat customers. So let's take a little trip over to Europe, virtually of course, because we'll talk about the pandemic stuff later. Europe has been offering an open model mobile payment platform for many, many years. So what does that mean? What does that look like? How do they do it? A European open program sets one location number for a parking area and allows the consumer to use the app of their choosing. So even in Germany, which is still a very cash-driven culture, 30% of their parking environments offer multiple payment providers using this system, using this model, offering that ever important concept of choice that we continue to hammer home here. Although Canada, where we are, we're much more evolved from a payment perspective, and we typically deal very little in cash. Our payment offering from a parking perspective is still very, very behind even that of Germany when you consider multi offerings. In other areas like the Netherlands, this type of parking program has seen 100% adoption. I was fortunate enough to travel to Amsterdam last year, and there's absolutely no parking hardware on the streets. In fact, their parkers are so educated that there's no longer even a need to advertise the participating apps. So everywhere you look, there's just a blue sign with a letter P and a location number. So what this means is a reduced amount of signage and clutter and 100% adoption of mobile cashless payments. So I'll admit, this did take me a bit to figure out. So remember our little chat about collaboration earlier. The strong technology foundation in Amsterdam has created a level of education in the parker that has allowed an evolution of how and where they use their parking program. So for instance, bikes are the #1 mode of transportation in this city. So what do you do about your super streamlined, well-oiled, multi-vendor, cashless paid parking program then? Well, you open bike garages and you transfer the exact same technology over to parking your bike. Further to this innovation and possibility, some cities in France have taken this one step further, whereby they offer one mobile cashless payment solution to pay for multimodal venues of transportation. So what this looks like is using one app and one user account. You can park your car, you can hop on transit, you can rent a bike, charge your electric vehicle, even ride sharing. So this is a future state that we envision coming to North America as well, but only if we start laying that strong foundation as they've been doing in Europe for decades. So with all that in mind, all that inspiration in our heads, let's go back to North America and check out the current state of things in the US and Canada. So let's consider how we commonly deliver parking messages right now. When I think of parking my car or guidance on how to park my car, I'm thinking of A-frame signs with the price, with arrows, single head meters along the street, or pay stations in parking lots. These are beacons of paid parking. They scream out automatically, you have to pay to park here. So what this means is that we have a very static and costly way currently of conveying messages to our consumer. It's not easily adaptable. It doesn't ever change with the rolling of times and the changes, especially that are required of us as parking operators now. So what's needed is an operational shift in mindset. So with a mobile offering, you're always collecting data. You're always making informed real-time decisions on your parking operation. You can easily change the information and push it out to the consumer quickly and with no extra time or cost. The idea then becomes that the parking experience goes from being very passive and static to very consumer-driven and very interactive. So where we've seen success with this is Atlanta. Atlanta is one of the first large cities in North America to adopt this European model. So you can see pictured here, it's one location number that's servicing the multiple mobile payment providers. So parkers in Atlanta really have no excuse behind not paying for their parking. Their choices are abundant. They have 4 of the leading mobile payment providers currently being offered, as well as their previous parking hardware still accepting payments. Choices with the parker, which is not only increasing the usage of mobile and cashless payments, but also increasing compliance overall in their operation. A similar example in Canada is in Winnipeg. So F&P parking operator had 12 surface lots offering one mobile app, while the city of Winnipeg was using an entirely different app offering. So this innovative operator decided to open up their program and offer 3 mobile payment types, or 3 mobile payment apps all at once. And in just 1 month of doing that, they saw their transactions increase by over 250%. So this multi-provider environment provided choice and therefore increased adoption of the program. The transactions for the initial mobile provider were untouched. They weren't cannibalized at all by the new offering. And instead, all these new transaction opportunities were realized. So what have we seen in our brief travels to Europe and back? choice provides option for compliance. This naturally will lead to increased adoption of a more convenient payment method and allow these users to continue to use their brands that they love the most. Multi-vendor programs also provide redundancy for the operator, so there's never any downtime for the cashless mobile payment program. Give consumers a choice. So this is not as simple as if you build it, they will come. You have to understand how this type of solution benefits your environment and then customize your adoption education to that. So let's take a look at 3 communities who created totally different yet successful adoption programs and achieved very similar results. So the first one in Miami. So Miami has a very solid parking operation. They have a very educated parking consumer. They've had mobile payments for over 10 years then they were offered largely as an add-on service. So their original parking program had a lot of hardware, but as mobile payment programs matured in their area, the hardware started being eliminated on a constant basis. So because of this reduction in hardware, there's less of a need to employ people for maintenance and collections. But with a little out-of-the-box thinking, no jobs were lost in Miami. Miami took this unique opportunity to change their PEOs, or parking enforcement officers, over to parking ambassadors. They actually created mobile payment foot soldiers with boots to the ground to educate their public and increase their adoption. So now met with a non-compliant parker that they would be, issuing a citation to, they were also able to provide a mobile payment education. So the parkers who downloaded this app were entered to win a contest, some sort of sweepstakes for some sort of large prize, but they weren't the only winners. In a simultaneous bid to get the employees on board, they ran contests for the PEOs or for the parking ambassadors or for teams of parking ambassadors. And the shift or the team who achieved the most consumer downloads also won a prize, like a pizza lunch. So the result of this collaborative effort was a 94% adoption rate on their cashless program. The next one I want to talk about is MBTA. MBTA is a massive commuter rail system across Massachusetts. Essentially, it's bringing people from over 100 locations into Boston every day and home again. So many of these locations they had were surface lots, but they had some gated environments. So to date, I think they've removed the gates on 8 locations and gone mobile payment only, which is kind of groundbreaking. So the benefit of to the operation was this cost reduction in this gated hardware, but the benefit to the parker was so much more. Now at the peak times, when everybody is piling into the garage at the beginning of their commute or attempting to exit after a long day, there's no more ingress egress issues, no more queuing up to make this payment. And the best part is the adoption education sits squarely on the hands of the parker. There's no gates. Now what? How do I pay? They self-educate on the new program. So the ultimate result in this mindset shift was 93% adoption rate. And finally, let's take a look at Galveston, Texas. So while paid parking had long been in effect in a very hardware-heavy downtown Galveston, there were still 10 miles of premium parking along the city's seawall that had always been free. That is until the city voters decided to launch a paid parking initiative that would direct revenue to seawall improvements and improve things like bathrooms and showers, along their seawall. So an opportunity to take a chance on a mobile payment app only program quickly presented itself as an efficient and a cost-effective way to realize new revenue in a timely manner. So there was still some concern, however, for those parkers that maybe didn't have a cell phone. So this concern was addressed with yet another very out-of-the-box solution. So they decided to have city-approved local vendors put a sign in their window saying, you can pay for your parking here inside the store. The parker could pay cash, and then the vendor would initiate a mobile payment app transaction on their behalf. This was a total win-win for both new mobile-only payment programs and the vendor, because While continuing to drive cashless parking transactions, the city was also driving traffic into their stores. So ultimately, mobile payments grew to see major success on the seawall and in downtown Galveston, who are now enjoying a blended adoption rate of approximately 85%. So you can see some of these catered ideas really work from community to community. So knowing what we now know about choice, collaboration, adoption, what have been the effects of this pandemic? Have they changed our course or simply increased the urgency around something that we have had all along? When we take a look at the concerns of the average parker prior to the pandemic, we can see that, that convenience was always top of mind. This was followed very closely by speed of transaction, and then way down the list of concerns was health. So at the height of the lockdown, health came charging up to the top of this list. People weren't keen to take public transportation or do ride sharing, so parking their car was unavoidable. Their health concerns were now centered around touching public equipment or waiting for their turn to pay for parking in a long lineup with other people. As we move towards today's reality of concerns, we can see that all of these things have really married almost into a singular priority. Consumers believe that contactless payments are a cleaner alternative to cash. But this doesn't only apply to parking. Food delivery apps scrambled to make prepay adjustments on their ordering systems, all the while using their apps to convey messaging on new delivery protocols that would protect everyone. Rules were in place for everyone's safety. Even retail pivoted. My son works for a clothing store that sells jeans and work boots. They now have an app for curbside order pickup to avoid having many people go into the store, and now they're realizing this entirely new revenue stream. But parking, we had this all along. Our mobile payment solutions are tried and true. They've simply come to the forefront of the consumer choice. The messaging was always there, just instead of inserting coins into our beacons of paid parking, we're using our beacon to display our ever-evolving messaging about contactless, cashless payments. Payments that can be made through an app of your choice in the safety of your own space. No more public lineups. So when we're thinking of how contactless payments benefit a parker, it's an app of their choice in their hand. It's convenient, it's very easy to use, and it's accessible. You can make a parking transaction wherever you feel safe and comfortable. And when we're looking at the benefits of a contactless payment for an operator, well, you've created now a safe parking environment for your visitor, and this means increased transactions and repeat parkers. You've also become asset light, spending way less on hardware, cash collections, maintenance. And finally, you're making data-driven decisions for your ever-evolving operations using your collaborations with your partners. So when we think back to the top 3 objectives from the beginning of this session, we can see that consumer choice not only matters, but it's a must to increase adoption and a cashless program. Technology collaboration with strong partners and services is key to successfully implementing this cashless program. And finally, cashless is contactless, providing safety and ease of use for your parkers. And that is why it's time to go cashless. I want to thank the Canadian Parking Association for having me today. I will be live on this meeting to answer any questions, or you can reach me at the information below. Thank you.